Round 8 of the AFL season is coming your way this weekend, and who knows who's going to win. It is a tough weekend to tip, but we're going to go through all 9 matches, hopefully help you find some winners. This is the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode number 27. This is our Round 8 review. The AFL season is flying through. We're already up to round 8 and we're going to be previewing all 9 matches coming your way this weekend in this episode. So stick around. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down in the comments below who you think's going to win this week. We'll be going through my tips later on in this episode, as always. If you're on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button. Appreciate all the interactions. Let's jump into it. There's 9 games to get through, so let's not waste too much time here. Let's jump into the football. First up, it's Thursday night football, and it's the Bombers Kangaroos Marvel Stadium. Probably not the most exciting Thursday night game of football we're going to ever see, let's be honest. Both teams not in the best form or look the best this year, but we'll see how they go. It could be a good game, even though history says that the Bombers should absolutely win this one and probably win it reasonably comfortably. That's not necessarily how it will go. If you are watching this as a video instead of just listening, you will see that there is a couple little numbers up on the screen for this match, and there will be for all 9 matches this weekend. We got the ELO, which is the ranking system rating for each team. As you can see, the Bombers are 1467, Kangaroos are 1298. The AFL average goes to about a 1500, so Bombers a bit below average, North Melbourne well below average, and then you plug that in to a formula, I guess, and you get your win percentage. And that I have them for every game for the rest of the season. As each game progresses, it updates all the rankings and all the percentages and whatnot, so throughout the year. But this one will have the Bombers at 72.5% win chance, Kangaroos at a 27.5%. Of course, it doesn't take into account like history of the matchup and some stuff like that. It takes into account home ground advantage. Not that there is a home ground advantage here. Both teams are Marvel Stadium tenants. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the Bombers haven't lost to the Kangaroos in a long time. I think it's 2016. I'm not sure how many games it is, but it's definitely more than 10. It's probably about 14, 13, 14, somewhere around there. Could be more, could be less, but it's definitely more than 10. The history says the Bombers are just too good for the Kangaroos. Granted, the Roos haven't been that great in that time period, but it's certainly a long time since they've won over the Dons, and that's not great because, I mean, the Bombers have not been sensational over that period either. Only had a couple years where they've really been even semi-decent, so the Kangaroos really do struggle, and that is not a great sign going into this one. If you're comparing the two teams this season so far, you'd say Kangaroos' early season were okay. They've had a couple really, really stinking games, but they were a lot better last week, whereas the Bombers started slowly, but sort of haven't been too bad over the last 4 games. They've won 3, and then they weren't terrible against Collingwood last week. They did lose by 41 points, but they were certainly in that game most of the way. So I would say, yeah, they're in a reasonable form. They're not outstanding, but reasonable form. They are missing some key players. Obviously, the first 2 ruckmen that they played this year, both out for the season, basically. So they're in with their 3rd ruckman, but luckily for them, that is Todd Goldstein, who is one of, I mean, he's not anymore one of the best, but he used to be one of the best ruckmen in the competition. So he's someone that has a lot of experience and a lot of talent, especially in the hit-out game. So there's that positive. Langford made a return last week. Was reasonably quiet, in all honesty, but I think you'll see him only get better this week and going forward. For the Kangaroos, they're missing a couple, which is not great news for them. Obviously, Paul Curtis is out for 3 weeks. If you missed the news, he has been suspended for 3 weeks. They've now accepted that after the tribunal found him guilty, and he's had a great start to the season. He's kicked 18 goals already this season, so really disappointing for the Kangaroos, no doubt about it. But they still have plenty of talent, so I wouldn't be writing them off just because of that, but they are going to have to find goals from somewhere else, because he has been their most consistent goal kicker. Nick Larkey also has 18 this year, but I think Paul Curtis has been outstanding. What else do we need to talk about for this game? Teams have actually been announced for this one, so George Wardlaw and Darcy Tucker are also out for the Kangaroos. That means there's 3 ins. We've got Bailey Scott, Will Phillips, and Finbar Maley, who is announced for his AFL debut. And then on the other side of the fence, Dylan Shield is out, and in comes Elijah Sartis. Huge in. He was huge in their VFL game last week. I can't remember exactly what numbers he put up, but I do remember it was a really good performance from him in the VFL. So he's earned his way back into this team, and pre-season he looked like he was in for a big season. He started the year a little bit slow and obviously has missed a couple games, but if he shows his potential, lives up to his potential, he could be in for a really good showing here. So I think that's a good in, at least, for the Bombers. The Bombers are going to go in favourites. There's no doubt about it. They've certainly had the history in this matchup. Their season looks a lot better than the Kangaroos. They're 3-3 from their 6 games, the Bombers, whereas the Kangaroos are 1-6. They've had maybe 2 of those other games have been acceptable. The rest have been pretty poor. Like, their game against Carlton was horrible. 3 quarters against Gold Coast was good. Unfortunately, their 1 quarter that was bad was absolutely terrible. Sydney, half was okay. The second half was terrible. Adelaide, they were okay, but they've lost 5 in a row. They're 1-6 for the season. It's a long way back for the Kangaroos, and they're not showing enough just yet. I don't think it's as bad as Kane Corns would tell you. I think they've got plenty of talent on their list still, but they need to find ways to start being more competitive for longer periods, I guess, and start converting some of these results into wins. Last week, obviously, Port Adelaide in Adelaide was always going to be a tough one, and to get within 9 points of that is a really good performance, but Port Adelaide is still a very hit-and-miss team this year so far. I don't think there's too much else to go on about in this game. It's one that the Bombers should win. We will almost certainly be tipping the Bombers. Could I see the Kangaroos winning? Absolutely, but not confidently enough to tip them in this. I think the Bombers should be too good. We'll jump into game number 2 of the weekend, and it's Friday night football. And it's St Kilda, Fremantle, once again at Marvel Stadium. So the first 2 games at Marvel. And once again, it's not on paper. It's not the game of the round. So both Thursday and Friday night football games are certainly interesting choices. Fremantle travelling to Melbourne. They're never as good in Melbourne as they are over in the West. Had a couple trips there already. And not been fantastic. 2 weeks ago, they lost to Melbourne, who hadn't won a game yet this year, so that's a slight concern for them. But on the other side of the fence, St Kilda's last few weeks have been quite atrocious. So once again, that's a pretty bad sign for them as well. History of these 2 teams, they pretty much mix them up. It's 5-5 over the last 10. So history doesn't tell us too much. Fremantle did actually beat St Kilda last year at Marvel Stadium by 17 points mid-season. Kicked 9 goals 18, did the Dockers, so they could have won by a lot more than they did. The year before, St Kilda won in Melbourne by 15 points, and the year before that, Fremantle did beat St Kilda again at Marvel Stadium, that time by 41 points. So history tells you that Fremantle play St Kilda pretty well at Marvel Stadium, so maybe it's not a concern for them. If you're looking at the head-to-head record, the record of both teams, so far this year, St Kilda 3-4 for the year, Fremantle 4-3. They've done it completely separate ways. St Kilda started the season 3-1. Were looking really good when they managed to go over to Adelaide and beat Port Adelaide. But since then, they followed it up with an okay performance against GWS in Gather Round, but they lost. And then 2 atrocious performances at Marvel Stadium. One against the Doggies, where they just could not play football at all after about the 5-minute mark of the first quarter. And then followed that one up last weekend against Brisbane, once again at Marvel. And for long periods out of that game, they could not get the ball outside of their defensive 50, let alone get it towards their forward 50. In the end, they lost by 45 points. It felt like it was more than that, though. They were not good. Whereas Fremantle started the season pretty rough. They've lost 3 games. 2 of them were in their first 2 weeks, or 2 of their first 3. Since then, they've gone 4-1 over the last 5 weeks. Only loss was that one in Melbourne against the Demons. So all in all, it's a solid start to the year. They were expecting to do well this year. A lot of people had high hopes for Fremantle. Perhaps haven't lived up to that yet. But if you just look at their record over 5 weeks, 4 wins and a loss, they're starting to show some good signs. Yes, the loss was against Melbourne, who hadn't won a game. But you don't stress about that too much. In the long-term success of a season, it's not the end of the world. So Fremantle will go in favourites, not huge favourites, just probably because they have dropped a couple games, especially in Melbourne. But overall, when you look at it here, they certainly on paper look like they're the better team in this one. Whether that is how it eventuates or not, we will find out. But you look across the stat board here, and pretty much across the season so far, Fremantle dominate in almost every facet of this game. St Kilda do have a higher average disposal count, but outside of that, there's not much that goes in their way. Fremantle have 6 extra inside 50s a game. They have a better rebound 50 rate as well, which is interesting. Obviously, Fremantle are a much better clearance team than St Kilda, Fremantle being one of the best clearance teams in the competition. Just most things look on the side of St Kilda. The one thing Fremantle probably have going against them is their accuracy hasn't been sensational, whereas St Kilda's has been pretty good. So I think we'll see a lot more opportunities created on the Fremantle side. Whether they convert them or not might be the difference in this game. Interestingly, 2 of the top players in the Coleman medal are going against each other in this game. We've got Josh Tracy, who a lot of people expected to do well in the Coleman this year. He's kicked 20 goals from his 7 games. He's been really consistent, been really good. But on the other side of the fence, a bit of a surprise packet. Leading goal kicker by a small forward in the competition is Jack Higgins. He's also kicked 20 goals in his 7 matches and putting together a really good season so far this year. Slowly creeping up on that 200 goal mark for his career, and he's probably in career best form just about right now, you would have to think. So it's going to be a tough ask for St Kilda, but don't be surprised if they win. You look at the ELO ratings on my screen. We've got St Kilda at 1492, so just below a 1500 average, and Fremantle were at 1544. So Freo are the better rated team going into this game. The win percentage is very close though, 50.18 for Fremantle, 49.82% for St Kilda. that the fact that it's in Melbourne certainly brings this game closer. But Fremantle have won multiple times against St Kilda at Marvel over the last couple years, like over the last 3 years. So don't be surprised to see Freo put in an okay performance here and potentially win it. They probably do play Marvel better than they played the MCG. Fremantle, that is. St Kilda definitely play Marvel better than the MCG, but the last 2 weeks they have not looked at all like that is the case. Jump into game number 3 of the weekend. It's Saturday afternoon football, and it's the Bulldogs versus Port Adelaide at Mars Stadium in Ballarat. Bulldogs do play this ground pretty well. They're in some pretty solid form. Port Adelaide are very up and down. Historically, over the last few years, I've been very adamant that the Bulldogs are the most inconsistent team in the competition. This year so far, though, they've kind of gone away from that, and they've been pretty consistent in my eyes. However, Port Adelaide have taken over that most inconsistent team. What they're doing week on week, you just don't know at the moment. You could not tell anybody. They've had a weird start to the year. They're 4-3. They have won their last 3, but like they were dominant against Hawthorn. They were solid against Sydney in Sydney. And then against North Melbourne, they only just crept across the line. So that's a weird thing. And you go back before that, they lost to the Bombers in Melbourne. They lost to St Kilda in Adelaide. They got flogged by Collingwood in round 1. Round 2, they smacked Richmond in Adelaide. So it's just been a really weird season for them. Whereas the Bulldogs have been fighting a really, really rough injury list so far this season to a lot of key players. Obviously, Sam Darcy's now gone down as well, but Bond's come back, so it's basically status quo in that regard. But they've started really well. They're 4-3 for the year. Their 3 losses, 1 against Brisbane, which was Gather Round, so neutral ground against one of the best teams in the competition. You kind of don't worry about that too much. Their second loss of the year was against Fremantle over in WA, so once again, you kind of forgive that one. And their other loss for the year, their first loss of the season, was a 6-point loss to Collingwood at the MCG. So, all 3 losses certainly forgive runs. They've managed to beat GWS, Carlton, St Kilda. They're starting to put together an okay season. They managed to win this one, which, in all honesty, they should do. They go to 5-3. They'll be cemented inside the top 8 for the week, and they're building towards something because they'll start getting players back, and you'd think that would only lead to them playing better football and looking better and beating even stronger teams. So look for a really big run from them. If they can get this win, that really puts them in a strong position. They're going to be pretty heavy favourites going into this game, even though really they don't have the best record against Port Adelaide. The Power have won the last 4 times they've met. The last time the Bulldogs did beat Port Adelaide was in that 2021 preliminary final. So that was a while back now. We're into 2025. But just on the stat sheet, it looks a lot like the Bulldogs should win this. But if you don't remember it, last year when these two teams met, it was over in Adelaide. Port Adelaide smacked them by about 50 points. And going into that game, it was Port Adelaide fans were really, really adamant that Ken Hinkley should be gone. They came out and did this, and all of a sudden they loved him again, and vice versa after this game. All the media and scrutiny and whatnot was on Luke Beveridge, so it's just an interesting little story from that game, but also going into this, like, in the last few years, it's been quite, I mean, none of them have been close. They haven't been dominant wins, but they've all been reasonably comfortable wins for Port Adelaide, so not great signs for the Doggies. They've only won 3 of the last 10. But, yeah, I don't know what to make of that. You look at the stat sheet this year so far, and Bulldogs certainly look the better team across the board. Port Adelaide's best has been really, really good. Like, their win against Richmond obviously was outstanding, but their worst has been really quite average. They got smacked by Collingwood. They weren't great against North Melbourne last week. So there's just some signs that Port Adelaide don't have that consistency. But that game against Hawthorn, what they did in that first quarter and a half, was simply outstanding. So it's weird and hard to work out exactly, I guess, where we're at. Whereas Port Adelaide, like Zach Butters comes in, he's now played 4 games this year, and the last 3 of them have been absolutely outstanding. He has been an incredible touch this year so far, so he's been a huge add to their team this year. Not this year, but since he's come in. He missed the first few weeks. So he's been really good. Rose has kind of had a slight adjustment in his positioning. He plays a little bit behind the ball, coming in and helping out in the midfield, but like starting behind the ball. And he's been really good in that role. Horn Francis is basically the opposite. He starts sometimes in front of the ball, but still gets plenty of it, does a lot with it. They have that really good midfield. Their forward line has a lot of potential, but perhaps hasn't had that success yet. Georgiadis looks like he will be a star. He's kicked 17 goals this year so far, so he's had a good output. Willie Rioli's got 11. But overall, I feel like their forward line maybe just hasn't quite got that star power of some of the other teams, and their back line, I think, is a concern. In all honesty, I don't think it's the best back line going around. But I mean, they have all the marquee players in the midfield, so that always makes it difficult to have good players in all positions. Like, there's no doubt about it. ELO rating system, Bulldogs 1573, Port Adelaide 1590, so both teams pretty close to each other there. Home ground advantage here for the Bulldogs puts them to a 54.75% win chance. Yeah, I don't know. What Port Adelaide will show up will determine how this game goes, I think. Both teams have a lot of talent. Both teams at their best will be a really good game. Will we get both teams at their best? I highly doubt it. Next up is the Saturday evening game, 4:40 kickoff, 4:15 local time in Adelaide. It's the Crows v the Blues. Adelaide Oval football, Saturday evening, and this could be a cracker. Adelaide are going in favourites, quite heavy favourites in all honesty, but is that how it's going to be? I guess we'll find out. It's a weird sort of history these two teams have had. The Crows have had the wood over the Blues the last little period at least. They've won the last 3. You got to go back to round 8, 2022 for the last time the Blues won. Adelaide have won 7 of the last 10, including those last 3 matchups. And last year, they won in Melbourne by 2 points, and they won the game over in Adelaide by like 60 points. Just under 56 points or so. So a lot of things are pointing towards Adelaide winning this one, but Carlton's form has certainly turned around. They lost their first 4 games. They weren't terrible in those 4 games. They were definitely better than Richmond. Just wasted opportunities and in key moments just made mistakes. But outside of that, the next couple losses weren't too bad. It was Hawthorn, not a terrible loss. It was the Bulldogs, only by 8 points. It was Collingwood by 17 points. So, not terrible. And then they had those couple easy wins that have really got them going. They smacked Eagles, they smacked North Melbourne, and then that's got their confidence up, and now they're playing good football. They managed to beat Geelong, I won't say super comfortably, but by 3 goals, well enough. So they've won 3 in a row, they're 3 and 4, they're 11th on the ladder. All of a sudden, their season's looking a lot better. So I wouldn't be writing Carlton off in this one. On the other side of the fence, Adelaide had that hot start where they won their first 3 games. They then had that tight loss to the Gold Coast before the disappointing gather round loss to Geelong at home, but then turned it right around the next week by beating GWS at home before last week, going over to the West. Not being terrible, but never really looking that threatening to Fremantle and going down. So they're 4-3, they're 5th on the ladder. I still think they've got a little bit of ways to go to be one of those top teams. But they're certainly showing a lot of good signs and a lot of signs that they didn't show us last year when they were definitely disappointing. ELO rating system still has Adelaide quite low because of where there's low starting point, and perhaps outside of the GWS one, I don't know if they've beaten too many teams that were high, like a lot higher than them on the rating system. But still 1477. They win this, they probably get very close to that 1500 mark. Carlton 1486. They were right down to about a 1440-ish, maybe even lower, 1430 a few weeks ago. But 3 wins in a row, including that win over Geelong, has bounced them back up. But Adelaide will go in with a 55.93% win chance, according to the All Aussie Rules rating system. What else to make of this game? Obviously, on the most part, Adelaide have been pretty high-scoring games, and both ways, outside of that GWS game. But I would imagine these two teams going at it, if the weather's clear, look for it to be a pretty high-scoring game. Carlton, on the most part, have reasonably high-scoring games. The Collingwood one, obviously, was the major exception to that, but the last 3 weeks, they've scored 121, 153 and 94. And Adelaide also, last 2 weeks, have scored a lot less, but up until that point had been a very, very high-scoring team. So I would imagine we'll continue to see a reasonably high-scoring game here, would be my prediction. I think that's everything for that game, so we'll jump into Saturday night football. There is 2 games on Saturday night. The first one we're looking at is over in the West. It's the Eagles v the Demons, and it's an interesting one, this one, mainly due to the reason that neither team has been going well this year at all. Melbourne will be favourites, even though it's all the way in the West, because they've won their last 2 games. They're back. I wouldn't say they're back, but they have certainly played a lot better the last 2 weeks to get a couple victories. But the Eagles have not looked good at all. Their best performance of the year was 2 weeks ago when they nearly beat the Bombers over in the West. Nearly beating the Bombers suggests that they should be very close, if not beating the Demons, because the Bombers did beat the Demons only the week before they went up against Eagles. So it just tells me that it's going to be an interesting game. It's 18th on the ladder v 15th on the ladder. It would have been 18th and 17th a couple of weeks ago, but Melbourne has won their last couple just to get themselves back into it a little bit. It's hard to recommend either team, in all honesty. Melbourne certainly look like the better team on paper from what we've seen this year, but they really travelled quite poorly last year. After about round 6 or 7, they started the season okay when they won a couple games in South Australia last year, but after that they travelled really poorly. So we'd want to see a bit more than that, but we haven't seen anything from West Coast this year that fills me with any confidence that we're going to see a win here. The Demons have won 4 of their last 5 matchups against the Eagles. Prior to that, the Eagles had a really good record against Melbourne, but prior to that, West Coast were a decent team, whereas Melbourne perhaps weren't. But I can't convincingly say that the Eagles are a chance here, because I just don't know if they are. They're 0-7 for the year. They've been quite putrid in almost all their games. They look like witches' hats at times, where they just... that one against GWS, I've harped on it a few times, but just that 5-6 minute period, not even that many, couple minute period where they just didn't even touch the ball and GWS would just take it out of the centre and basically score at will, was deplorable. And there's been some bad signs for that over this year. So until we start seeing a little bit better from them, I won't be tipping them. I said that about Carlton last week. Until they beat someone decent, I won't be tipping them. Well, maybe that's what will spark the Eagles into form. Is a all Aussie rules hoodoo, but what I've seen from them hasn't been great. Melbourne, I mean, you can say the same about. They got smacked by Gold Coast only 5 weeks ago. Followed that up with a pretty poor performance against Geelong. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. They got quite convincingly beaten by the Bombers. But that game against Fremantle in Melbourne was really good. So on that performance alone, I probably will be tipping Melbourne in this. But once again, it's another game that I'm not confident in. It's a really tough round, I think, this week. ELO system has West Coast at 12.89 and the Demons at 14.19, gives Melbourne 61.4% win chance according to the system. Next up, it's Collingwood Geelong. This one will be at the MCG on Saturday night. It's the game where Jack Crisp breaks the record for most amount of games in a row in the AFL history. And it's a big game for both teams for many, many reasons. Collingwood will be going into this as favourites. They're sitting 6-1 now for the season. They've won their last 6 matches. They're sitting on top of the ladder. Meanwhile, Geelong have had a little bit of an interesting season. They started it really hot against Fremantle. Couple losses there, rounds 2 and 3 against St Kilda and Brisbane. They turned it around with a really good run. They beat Melbourne. The win against Adelaide was outstanding. And then they beat Hawthorn as well at the MCG a couple of weeks ago, which was really good. But a loss last week against Carlton, just to bring them back down a peg or two. They're sitting 7th on the ladder. And things could be going better for the Cats. Certainly looked like they were going to be going better after round 1. And then again, when they beat Hawthorn, it was all positive signs. But there's just a couple chinks in their armour so far. On the other side of the fence, Collingwood, obviously their season is just getting better and better, in all honesty, so far. Started really poorly against GWS, but since then it's just been one-way traffic, really. They smacked Port Adelaide, got over the line against the Bulldogs before wins against Carlton, Sydney, Brisbane and Essendon. So they're sitting 6-1. Life's pretty good in Collingwood land at the moment. If we're to look at the history of this matchup, over the last 10 matchups, it's slightly in favour of Geelong, 6-4. So just in front are the Cats. They have a history of playing in finals as well. In that last 10 matchups, so since the start of 2019, they've played in 3 finals. 3 finals, sorry. And 2 of those have been won by Geelong. So they played 2019 qualifying final, Collingwood won by 10 points. 2020 semi-final, Geelong absolutely smashed them by 68 points. And then in 2022, they played in the qualifying final, and Geelong won that one by 6 points. So history says that both these teams are usually up there. And, I mean, over that period, they've both been pretty solidly consistent teams. Collingwood have missed finals, I think, twice in that period of 5 or 6 years, and Geelong have missed it just once. So both consistent teams, but last year Geelong did beat Collingwood by 20 points. It was a game where Geelong kind of controlled most of the way. Collingwood just stuck around but never really threatened. 2023, the year Collingwood won the premiership, Collingwood won both matchups. Both pretty tight games. 2022, obviously the year Geelong won the premiership, Geelong won both matchups, the round 3 and then the qualifying final matchup. 2021 went the way of Geelong, and 2020 went, they split them. Collingwood won in round 7, and then in the semi-final, Geelong won. So history says it could be a close-ish game, the last 3 times these two teams have met, the winning score has been, I was going to say over 100. 2 of those games, both teams scored over 100, and then last year when these two teams met, it was 91 to 71. So numbers suggest it should be a good game. ELO rating system has Collingwood as 1625, Geelong 1569. So Collingwood going in as a 57.92% chance of winning here. It's going to be an interesting matchup where this game's going to be run and won. It could come down to a lot of things. It's going to be about Jeremy Cameron up one end. It's going to be about whether this Collingwood forward line can get things going. Obviously, at times they rely on their midfielders and their small forwards a lot. But then there's games like against Port Adelaide where the tall forwards were really good for Collingwood. But I would imagine we're going to see Mason Cox come in for Dan McStay, who's out for a while. They've announced Darcy Moore's back in, so he'll come back into captain here. And, it's just going to be a game where the best team on the night's going to win. Both teams probably, certainly have the potential to win this game. On current form, you'd have to say probably Collingwood, but once again, zero confidence in that. Geelong have, obviously, their best is really, really good. Collingwood, we've only seen their best outside of round 1 this year, or opening round, sorry. So, I think I'll be tipping them just based on the fact that they haven't given us a reason not to tip them at the moment. Next up, we jump into Sunday football, and it's the battle for the bridge, the Sydney Derby. Sydney Swans, GWS, SCG, Sunday afternoon. This right here should have been either the Thursday or Friday night game. Probably Friday night game, in all honesty. This should have been it. They like to play this game as an afternoon matchup for some reason. I don't know why, but this game on a Friday night would be really good viewing for the national audience instead of what we've got, but that's okay. I'm not a scheduler. GWS will go in as favourites. They've certainly had the better season so far. Sydney have had a weird season. They lost their first couple. They then won 2 in a row, and it looked like they were getting back on track, but they've lost 3 in a row. Granted, potentially all against okay teams, Collingwood, Port Adelaide and Gold Coast, but their season's really struggling to get going at the moment. They're 2-5, they're 14th on the ladder, and if they drop this one, it's a long road back if they want to make it to finals this year. If they were to miss finals this year, it would be a really strange 4-year stretch they've had. It would go grand final loss, like big grand final loss, miss finals, big grand final loss, miss finals. So they'll be trying to arrest that poor momentum and get going. At some point, they are going to play some really good football. Whether it's this week or not, it could well be this week, because if there's a game to get them up and about, it will be the battle for the bridge. On the other side of the fence, GWS have shown some really good signs and some just, I won't say bad signs, but just not getting the job done sometimes. Their first 5 weeks was really good. They were sitting at 4-1 a couple of weeks ago with their only loss in Tasmania against Hawthorn. Things were looking all right for them. I mean, yes, St Kilda and West Coast were 2 of those wins, but they'd also smacked Collingwood in opening round. But their last 2 games have not been great. They kicked 4 goals 10 against Adelaide, and they only lost by 18 points, but they only scored 34 for the match. And then followed it up last week, losing quite comfortably to the Bulldogs. In all honesty, 3 out of the 4 quarters, they were right in that game, but it was just that Bulldogs' onslaught in that third quarter blew them away, and they need to find a way to get their season going. As I said, they will be starting this game favourites. even though it's at the SCG. I think we're going to see a cracker. These two teams do tend to play some good games against each other, and I would not be surprised if this didn't go down to the wire. Obviously, they met in the qualifying final last year, and it did go down to the wire. Sydney had to come back from behind to win that one. They played a really good last quarter, and Joel Amartey kicked the winning goal late in that one. They met 3 times last year, and Sydney got all 3 of them. History says Sydney probably do have the wood over GWS. There's only one out of the last 7 matchups between these two teams have GWS won, which was the 2023 Round 7 matchup. Outside of that, it's all been one way. Another 2 teams that have played each other in finals a lot over the history of GWS. Not so much, only twice since the start of 2021. One of them was an elimination final in Launceston in a COVID year, which GWS won by a point, and then they met last year in a qualifying final in which Sydney won by 6 points. So the numbers do suggest Sydney should be right in this, but what we've seen so far from them this year has not been great. So I think I'll be tipping GWS just based on the fact that their best so far this year has been a lot better than Sydney's best that we've seen this year. I don't think there's too much else to say about it. Obviously, the ELO rating system has both these teams very similar, 1539 for Sydney, a 1543 for GWS. The fact that it's a home game for Sydney just gives them the edge here, a 56.64% win chance. It's a game that I could see going either way, but I will be tipping GWS unless something changes my mind between now and then. Next up, it's another Sunday afternoon game, and it's not the best game of the round either. It's Hawthorn, it's Richmond, it's MCG, Sunday afternoon. A team that's expected to play deep into the finals against a team that certainly isn't. Hawthorn ELO 15.95, Richmond 12.99, which gives Hawthorn an 84.6% win chance. What to say about this one? There's a lot, or not a lot, depending which way you look at it. Hawthorn should be too good. They met twice last year and they smacked them both times. Before that, the history certainly said Richmond had the wood of the matchup. Like, outside of those last 2, it was like 1 and 6 with a draw from the previous 8 matchups in favour of Richmond. So that kind of turned around last year, though, with Hawthorn taking both matchups. What else do we say about it, really? Hawthorn will be massive favourites. They're in some good form. They did lose back-to-back games. Obviously, that Port Adelaide one was really bad. The Geelong one was a total fine game. They weren't bad. They weren't great, but they were okay. But following those back-to-back losses, they get a really good run because they got West Coast and now they get Richmond, a really positive chance for them to really get their confidence back. On the other side of the fence, Richmond have already outperformed what most people, including myself, expected to see from them this year. They've got 2 wins. I don't think this will be their third. I can see them putting up an okay fight. I could see them even only losing by 35 to 40 points. I can't see them doing much better than that, though. Hawthorn should be much too good. And I would be very, very surprised to see anything different than that on Sunday afternoon. Jumping into the final game of the round, and it's a Sunday night game at the Gabba. Obviously a holiday in Queensland on Monday, I believe, which allows them to do this Sunday night game, which definitely means that my podcast to review this round will definitely not be out until Monday night. But it's Brisbane Gold Coast, Gabba. Brisbane will be going in favourites due to this being their home game. If it wasn't their home game, if this was on the Gold Coast, it'd be interesting to see where the odds were at. Brisbane ELO of 1671, Gold Coast moving on up. They're up to a 15.23. Gives Brisbane a 75.78% win chance, according to the All Aussie Rules rating system. Both teams in fine form. Brisbane 6-1, second on the ladder. Only loss coming 2 weeks ago to Collingwood by 52 points. Gold Coast played one less game, but 5-1, third on the ladder. Really high percentage. One and only loss coming 2 weeks ago against Richmond at Marvel Stadium. Both teams really good. This is game of the round on paper. There's a couple good games on paper, but this should be the game of the round. Whether it ends up being or not, I'm not sure. But if we look at the history of this matchup, it's one way. It's Brisbane Lions. It always is Brisbane Lions. They've won 9 of the last 10. The only time Gold Coast were successful was round 20 of 2023, which interestingly enough, the Brisbane Lions were the much better team that year, but for whatever reason, Gold Coast beat them by 41 points in round 20. It's one-way traffic. Last year they met twice, and the first time was, I can't remember if the first one was at the Gabba or Gold Coast, but Brisbane were undermanned. I think that's where Logan Morris made his debut. They had injuries galore going into the game. They had more injuries during the day, and then they had more injuries throughout the game. And that just kind of made it even bigger win. It was only 34 points, but just what Brisbane had going into that game, they had no right to win it, but they did. And then they met again later on in the year in round 20 last year, and Brisbane won it by, again, almost 30 points and quite comfortably. So the history says Brisbane should be too strong here. On the numbers for the year so far, Gold Coast certainly look the better team. However, Brisbane have definitely had that harder run out of the two teams so far this year. In my opinion, at least. I mean, they've beaten Geelong, they've beaten the Bulldogs, they lost to Collingwood, granted, but they also beat Sydney in round 1, and I can't think of who they played in round 2. It might come to me, it might not. But like Gold Coast, they've been getting the job done. They obviously beat Adelaide up there, but 3 out of their last 5 wins have been against Richmond, North Melbourne and Melbourne, who are all very lowly ranked teams. So they're starting to get tougher matchups now, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But it also means that their numbers across the board have kind of been inflated because they have had some really big numbers against some of these teams. They scored 120 against Melbourne. They scored 141 against North Melbourne. So we'll see how they go against a really good opposition this week on Sunday night. Game of the round. Not the worst way to finish a round, in all honesty. It should be a good game. I would love to see this at prime time on a Friday or Saturday. But when I'm winding down and wrapping up my weekend of football, maybe this isn't the worst way to spend it. So yeah, I'll be on the couch watching that one. That is all 9 matchups heading into this round. We've got a couple more things to go through before we wrap it up. We'll do the ELO rating system in order, coming your way in a minute, and then we'll finish with my tips for the round. Yeah, and that's basically it. Don't forget to check me out on all my social medias, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, all of the above. TikTok. We do a lot of TikToks as well, so go check them out. If you're not on the YouTube channel, go check that one out as well. There's plenty of videos that go live most weeks on the channel. This podcast goes out there, but also plenty of other videos. So go check that all out. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Jumping into the ELO rating system post round 7. Brisbane's still sitting on top. They're a 1671. They've been number 1 all season. That hasn't changed here. And in all honesty, probably won't change this week. Even if they were to lose to Gold Coast, Collingwood to beat Geelong, it's unlikely that would be enough to get a swap in that top 2. It would go close, but I don't think they would quite get there. Hawthorn sitting third. They go up one spot last week, so they were fourth going into the round. Port Adelaide also moved up a spot. They're 1590. They obviously started the season quite high. I think they were equal second highest ELO going into the season, so they have only slightly dropped for the year, but they have dropped a little bit. So that's why they're still sitting fourth on the ELO rating system, even though they're 10th on the ladder. They had a higher starting point than most teams. The Bulldogs, they're fifth. They moved up 3 spots. This was their big moving week. They beat GWS, and they got the reward for it. Geelong obviously lost a big game against Carlton, but Carlton at the moment aren't the highest ranked team. So that certainly saw them drop a few spots down to 6th spot. Fremantle jump up a couple spots into the 8th. They're in 7th in the ELO rating system. GWS, they dropped a couple spots from 6 down to 8. Couple losses in a row for them. Sydney, they're really free-falling at the moment. They drop another 2 spots here. They're down to 9 now. And if they were to lose this weekend against GWS and Gold Coast win, they certainly will drop another spot. Gold Coast in 10th, they moved 1 spot up. This is their big chance to move up this week. An away game against Brisbane. If they were to win that, they will jump up a couple spots, you would imagine. They'll certainly jump above either Sydney or GWS, whoever loses that matchup. St Kilda, they drop 1 spot from 10th down to 11th. Carlton move up 2 spots thanks to a really good win and 3 wins in a row now. They're 12th now. Adelaide lost a spot, even though it wasn't a away loss to Fremantle. They do lose that spot due to the fact that Carlton won by so much against a really high-rated team. Essendon, they go from 13th to 14th. Obviously, playing Melbourne, who's right below them this week, will be an interest. Oh, they're playing North Melbourne, who are 2 positions below them. Melbourne are 15th. No change for them. They stayed where they were. North Melbourne, 16th. They do move up a spot due to the fact that they played really well against Port Adelaide, whereas Richmond did not play so well and lost to a low-ranked team. So Richmond did drop back to 17th. And West Coast still in 18th. And hard to see a world where they don't stay there. Although, if they do win this week, they will jump up a spot. And, I mean, they are playing Melbourne, so they get the chance. But if they do lose to Melbourne, they will drop even further down from Richmond in 17th. Jumping into my tips for the week. These were my tips as of Wednesday evening, so things may change depending what I see happen over the next couple days. But I'm going Bombers by 9 points over the Kangaroos. I just can't tip the Kangaroos. The Bombers have the history of this matchup. It's just everything points to them winning this one. Fremantle by 15 over St Kilda. Fremantle have okay record at Marvel against St Kilda, and that's the reason why I'm confident enough in saying them. Doesn't mean they'll win, but I'm happy enough with that tip. Bulldogs by 21 over Port Adelaide. I just think Bulldogs' best is better than Port Adelaide's best at the moment. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the reason. Maybe their worst is better than Port Adelaide's worst. I don't know. I expect to see the Bulldogs win this one. Doesn't mean they will. Adelaide by 3 points over Carlton. This is one of the ones that could go either way. I think Carlton are fully back. They had a rough start to their year, but they weren't playing terrible football. They've got their confidence up now, and they're really in a dangerous spot. Even though Adelaide have the history, this game could go either way, but I have tipped Adelaide by 3 points. Melbourne over West Coast. I can't tip West Coast based on what we've seen this year. Eventually, they will bring something better. I hope that it's this week. I just don't know if it will be. So I've got Melbourne to win that one. Geelong, Collingwood. I know earlier in this podcast I did say Collingwood were going to be my tip, and in all honesty, they probably will be. But at the moment, it's Geelong, and this will be my official podcast tip. Will be Geelong by 5 points. When it comes down to it, I probably will tip Collingwood when when it comes down to my proper, well, all the tipping competitions I do. GWS, that both teams are not playing great football the last couple of weeks, but GWS are still playing a lot better than Sydney from what I've seen, so I've got them by 25. Hawthorn should be way too good for Richmond, you'd think. I've got them by 51. And then Brisbane by 19 over Gold Coast. It's at the Gabba. Most things point to Brisbane winning that one, I think. So that's my 9. We had a really good week in the tipping last week. We went 8 out of 9. We got the one game wrong, which was Carlton Geelong. So hopefully we can do that again. This is a really tough week of tips, though. I can see a lot of these games going either way. So who I end up tipping in, a lot of them could change a few times in my mind, at least over the next few days. That's everything I have for you. Round 8 football. If you're new here, don't forget to follow. We do 2 podcast episodes every week. We come to you live Thursday morning. Not live, but we come to you every Thursday morning with a preview of this weekend's action in the football world. And then we have a review episode that goes live Monday every week. Usually Monday night, just due to the fact that Sunday night games or even late Sunday afternoon games can be tough to get a video out that night. It's hard to wrap up all the football action that quickly. But yeah, make sure you stick around. Go check out my other videos. Go check out all my socials. I appreciate you for sticking around if you're still here. I'll be back on Monday with a review of these games. Go check out the TikTok. There'll be 1-minute reviews of every match over the weekend. Yeah, this is the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. Thanks again.